the acquisition of unwarranted influence.
The dearness of our beliefs with fire and steel, and we must stand or see the promise of 2 centuries trump.
All we say to America is be true to what you said on paper. But somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech.
All right.
Well,
sorry,
Mr. Cyrus Janssen. Go, sir. Wow, we got so much to talk about tonight, don't we?
We do, Alex. It's good to see you back here on the stream, my man. And thank you for joining me tonight, everybody. I want to welcome you to tonight's show. Kind of an emergency live stream, I would say, Alex, where, you and I are both on the road. We're both traveling. As you guys can see, we're not in our normal studios right now. I know it's taken a couple of days for us to process everything that's happening. Obviously, some unprecedented events in the United States. And it's really this event. I mean, I'm here in the United States at the moment. This event really has shocked the nation. We see a very divided, a very polarized United States. And I think we're going to have a very interesting discussion here. Everyone, we do have Carl Zha, who's going to be joining in a little bit later. He's actually in Shanghai. He's in a taxi right now trying to get to his place to get set up. So a little bit late on the live stream today. But Alex, let's get your opening thoughts, my friend.
Yeah, thank you. Also, we may have Patrick Lancaster come in give us a report here in the Donbass area. Things going on there, Gio. Man,
that would be good. That's good to bring that out. Definitely bring that element up as well. It's been a while since we've live streamed, Alex. We need to make a little bit more regular appearances here for the people, I think.
Totally agree. We saw that entrance of the start of our live stream tonight. Some memorable names in political history here in the United States. And some of them, their comments and some of the situations on these people have done a full circle in today's political landscape. We are seeing a country that is very divided. I think we've called this divided nation or divided America. I know we have a lot more to cover than just that. But that alone being said, I truly feel that we are at a point in America right now where things are getting pretty hot here, Cyrus.
Yeah. Oh, it is, Alex. I mean, it's one of the things where, I was chatting with one of my colleagues, who lives in Shanghai, and he's as soon as this happened, he said, one thing that I'm really happy right now is that I'm in China. That this is a country of stability, and I think this is a really interesting concept for a lot of people around the world. And I kind of want to give this American perspective because, many of you know that I am a U.S. citizen. I've lived abroad for over 15 years. I travel back and forth. I'm kind of traveling around the world. But it is it's a uniquely American thing, where we have to deal with these kind of tragedies on a regular basis. There is no other country in the world that has to go through what the United States has to go through. Obviously, it is a choice. It is a choice that many Americans are very happy to make. The irony here is that, Charlie Kirk, who did lose his life, was a very big advocate of the Second Amendment, a very big advocate of, even going on the record and saying that, unfortunately, gun deaths are necessary, for the lifestyle that we want to live in the United States. I think what's really interesting, Alex, is that, I think part of in our work is we really try to help people understand China geopolitics around the world. And it's always important to have some nuance. It's always important to have perspective. And I don't think you can understand that unless you really do travel around the world and you're able to see, different societies and how they function, different countries and how they operate. And then it also, even for me as a U.S. citizen, it gives me a better understanding how my country works. Unfortunately, I mean, the statistics don't lie. The the amount of gun crimes that we have here in the United States, the plethora of violence, there is a very heavy price to pay. For example, even free speech today in the United States, we're reaching a tipping point where this is becoming very dangerous. And so it makes you even question, do you really have free speech? I mean, Alex, I've had a lot of people reach out to me just saying similar thing, like Cyrus, you're also in the public eye, right? I mean, you're also a YouTuber that speaks out on very passionate topics and not everyone's going to agree with. And how's your safety, in the United States? I mean, these are very interesting discussions, and I think it kind of goes into our world, Alex, of geopolitics and how we're analyzing events around the world. Yeah, I mean, it's been a very, very, very interesting time in the United States the last few days. This really does seem like a major event. I mean, much bigger than obviously the shots at Donald Trump. Obviously, Trump survived, so that goes without saying. But definitely something's changing here in the United States.
Yeah. Okay. I want to chime in on this and just give you my take on this. When you said that it was a country that has made those choices. It's a country that has left scars on other countries, and other countries have had to rebuild, whether it's through regime change, whether it's through, all-out war in other nations. Right now, as we speak, the United States has put a $50 million bounty on the head of another country, Venezuela. Okay. Now that's a sitting president. It's a sovereign nation. But America, the Department of Justice, has put a $50 million bounty on the head of a sitting president. A country that has seen, a boat bombed in international waters. We've seen what Qatar has gone through. How on earth does a sophisticated missile get through airspace, through Saudis, even Qatar's airspace, where America has a military base, and killing other people who they agreed to negotiate a peace deal, but I guess it wasn't fast enough, or it wasn't quick enough for Israel, and they struck. When I saw that, I said, okay, well, no one's really safe here. And then we wonder why the nation of America is becoming unhinged, why there's so much division. We become numb to these things on our television screens.
Oh, absolutely.
It's a nation that's being, has anybody seen what Gaza looks like from a Google map? It just takes your breath away. And we're trying to understand how young minds in this complex world can bring all this information in, then try to move forward. I mean, when we were young in school, Cyrus, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have mobile phones. Yeah. If something happened in school, we might get laughed at for the day or the afternoon, and the kids forgot about it the next day. But there are digital footprints, these videos, this intensity of this media that comes in. A lot of these young minds cannot adapt to it and cannot understand. And then we wake up and go, well, how did this happen? Right. Then you hear people that are in support of the Constitution, that right to bear arms. Right. Then there's people that are against it. We have to think, a young mind, yes, the person did it, but what is driving that person? What is driving that rage in people? Is it a certain class? Well, we have to look at poverty. Is it one of the 25% of the university students that took prescription drugs? Is it one of the Americans that took 6.7 billion prescriptions for pharmaceutical products in 2024 and 2025? Is that driving it? Because we always hear this in every conversation, Cyrus. They want this to happen to us, and they want that to happen to us. We should be entitled to have guns, or guns should be restricted. How about, instead of trying to talk about guns for a moment, let's find and maybe finance and understand and unravel all the carnage that's happened over the last few decades, and really get down to the mental health issues that this nation is so sick. It is sick. I'm sorry to say it, but there are people that need help. Shouting at them, telling them they should do this or do that is not working.
Oh, definitely. Alex, I mean, there's the mental health crisis in America is absolutely a pandemic. I mean, this is really the real pandemic inside the United States. And really, I mean, we see this, through societies around the world. But I mean, the problem is I want to go to an interesting thing that I've noticed on Twitter this week, Alex, and this is something if you follow me on Twitter, you've been seeing. I've probably I've been engaging with a lot of these people because not
Seen it.
surprisingly, not surprisingly, Alex. I mean, this won't come as a surprise to you, is that a lot of people, believe it or not, are actually blaming China, for this event. They're blaming China, and it's all. I mean, we've reached the level of ridiculousness inside the United States where, seemingly every single problem that you have, you can find a way to somehow revert it back and blame China. That's unfortunately the society that we're living in. Now, here's the theory: how do you get to, an assassination of Charlie Kirk? And relating that back and blaming China. Well, here's the logic from the people that are taking this viewpoint. A lot of people, and what's very interesting is some of them are even like Chinese Americans that are seeing this. And there's this one elderly Chinese woman who goes by the name of Xi Van Fleet on Twitter. I've been tweeting with her, and it's very difficult to see the kind of tweets that she's saying, because she's basically saying, look, the people that do these kind of attacks, they're obviously brainwashed from China. They're brainwashed about communism. This is all to do with communism. And the interesting story here, and kind of the backstory for everybody to have the context, is this lady, she grew up in China, under Chairman Mao's days. So back in the days, she's an elderly lady. And so her whole entire platform on Twitter is trying to warn everybody about, about basically how bad Chairman Mao was and how that influence is now coming into the United States. The funny thing about this is, Alex, and I think you'll agree with me on this, is, it's very interesting when I see these people online, and I'm saying, I have no doubt that you grew up in China under tough times. I mean, if you were growing up in China in the 60s or 70s, I mean, you didn't have a lot of money, you didn't have a lot of opportunity at that time, and for however you did it, you left and you became a naturalized U.S. citizen, and now you're living in America. And I see this very common with some of these groups, is that they leave China, and she hasn't probably been back to China in 40 years. So it's not, what kind of expert or kind of insider is she really to China? She probably speaks Chinese still, but if you have not been to China in 40 years, how do you know anything about the country? I mean, the China of today, as we know, is very different than the China of 40 years ago, certainly of Chairman Mao's time. Alex, I mean, if you haven't been to China in 4 years, it's completely different. If you haven't been to China in 4 months, it's completely different, because we know how fast society is changing, how the infrastructure, how the government, I mean, that was a very interesting thing for me, when I was locked out of China during COVID, as many people were. There was a period of a few years where I couldn't get back to China. And it was amazing to get back and just see how things had evolved and changed. And so I think what we're seeing right now, Alex, is we're seeing this radicalization, even on social media, where people are trying to, they're saying, look, this, for example, the shooter, he was radicalized, and it's all because of communist ideology. And the other thing is, you talk about the social media, right? You talk about cell phones and children and access to that. And, of course, this then opens up the big debate on, is it TikTok? Is he influenced from TikTok? Is this the CCP influencing TikTok in the United States? So we're kind of going down this big rabbit hole and of again, trying to blame China. I'll kind of wrap my little segment up here and just simply say, what we have to realize, Alex, is I think you're spot on. You said a couple of really good points. Number one is, we're constantly having access to these phones. And honestly, this is, I want to kind of really make a key point here. There's a reason why China has an age restriction on social media. Okay. Douyin, the Chinese version of TikTok, if you are under the age of 18, you have to register your ID. Actually, you have to register your ID for everybody. But obviously, if your ID is under the age of 18, then you have restricted hours that you are able to be on that app. And a couple of years ago, you might have remembered, Alex, I was on Piers Morgan. We were talking about TikTok, and I said, look, this is what China is doing. And even Piers said, there's something to be said for that, Cyrus. There's something to be said for actually limiting this. And, maybe that's not a bad idea, just because, like you said, Alex, at that age, you're not able to really process what's going on, right? Like you said, when we were younger, we might get teased in school. Somebody might say something, maybe you wrote a note about somebody, like, oh, haha, you make fun of somebody, you pass a note, and guess what? The next day we forget about it and on you go. But now, as a father as well that has children in school, Alex, you won't believe what these kids are doing in school with the cyberbullying and all of this stuff. So, this really should make us take a step back and realize, how dangerous social media can be. And it really is a double-edged sword, because the true irony is that you and I are both YouTubers. I mean, we're obviously doing a live stream right now to talk about the problems, but it is, I do want to kind of bring that point up. And I think it's very interesting when you do have China and the Chinese government saying, look, we need to monitor this, because it is not healthy to have unrestricted access to social media when you're under the age of 18 and be glued to your phones 24/7, constantly consuming this. And as you know, Twitter is one of the most vile places in the entire world to spend time on. There's a lot of, and again, I always say it's like a swamp. There's a lot of good information on Twitter, but you've kind of got to dig through the swamp to find the pieces of gold through all that muck and dirt and just terrible stuff on there. I mean, it really is a tremendous amount of disinformation, a tremendous amount of hatred. And so, we're just living in a very different time than what you and I grew up, Alex.
Very complex. Thank you for that, Cyrus. We're just want to say hello to Carl Zha's audience, and as well Patrick Lancaster is backstage. We're going to bring him onto the program here in a bit. Give us a thumbs up if you're okay there, Patrick, in the backstage. It looks like good. Okay, I want to read something to you guys, just so you guys can kind of understand when I said America is sick here. In 2023, the most recent year for which complete data is available, 46,728 people died from gun-related injuries in the United States, according to the CDC. Now, of that, suicides reached, I believe it was 27,300, accounting for approximately 58% of all firearm fatalities. Gun homicides, while down from a peak in 2021, still were 17,927. You mix that in there with prescription drugs, whether it's Adderall and university campuses, or to the 6.7 billion prescriptions that were filled for the tune of $1.1 trillion in 2025. We have an issue here. We have a big issue here. And we have small minds that are trying to figure it out. We have a responsibility. And people ask me the same thing, Cyrus. Well, what do the Chinese think about gun control? They don't talk about it. Well, what do the Chinese think of their government? Well, they're not complaining about it. Cyrus has told you on this program many times there was a Harvard survey taken for this. And what was the approval rating number for the government at the time when the survey was taken?
I mean, it's over 90%. It's got to be 92, 93%. But it was a fascinating, though, just for some context on that, Alex. It was like a 10-year study, done by Harvard. So this is not some, like, hey, I went to China for a week and asked 10 people, what they thought about China. It's like, no, we went to every region. We went to multiple, we basically went to every region, every major city, even towns, villages, studied 10 years, interviewed hundreds of thousands of people. And the conclusion is that Chinese people genuinely, support their government. And the issue here, Alex, that's very interesting is, we often get criticized where we say like, well, yeah, Shanghai and Beijing's a nice city. Why don't you go to the smaller cities, and get off the beaten path? And then you'll see where, the Chinese people don't like, the government. It's actually the opposite. You actually will find the biggest levels of support will actually be in the 5th, 6th-tier cities or in the mountains or the villages, because that's where China's government is doing the most prominent amount of work, and that's where, smaller villages have been completely transformed. And, I was in Beijing, a couple months ago, or just last month, we met up in China. And by the way, everybody, Alex and I have a video that we recorded in Guangzhou. We're going to be releasing that on my YouTube channel tomorrow morning. So stay tuned for that. We'll shout that out again at the end of the stream. But we do have a walk and talk that Alex and I, do while we were in China. But I was in Beijing and met up with Li Jingjing. Many of you might follow her on YouTube as well. Great Chinese reporter. And, she always tells the story of, Cyrus, when I was growing up on the outskirts of Beijing, I was in a small village. I mean, we didn't have much, right? I mean, we didn't have running water when I was a little girl growing up in China. And I said, what about now? And she's like, yeah, my parents drive a Tesla now. It's like, look at the change of that. No running water to driving a Tesla. That's, so again, what do you think of, that villages obviously has running water, obviously has been repaved, a tremendous amount of structural improvement. So yeah, this is a really interesting point, Alex. And again, this is why I like to always highlight a lot of these Western studies, because same thing when we talk about Africa, for example, the Alliance of Democracies, they had an amazing survey where they had over 300 surveys from around all of Africa. And the conclusion was, look, China is genuinely popular in Africa because it's because they can see the tangible results of Chinese investment. This is why if you actually talk to African people, they do have a very favorable opinion of China because they can see the tangible results.
Another interesting point that I want to make is, people ask me the day-to-day life about people's lives here in China. What do they talk about? Most say, well, they don't have any freedom of speech, do they? Oh, trust me. The Chinese talk. They talk a lot. But they're not talking necessarily about the things that you talk in your country or they talk in our country, where we hear it's the left, it's the right in Canada, or if it's liberal or it's progressive or whatever.
Yeah.
To China, it's us.
Yeah.
It's
Chinese.
all of us. Is there a problem with the roads? Okay, it's our problem. Government fixes it. Thank you, government. Government has safe roads. Thank you, government. Now imagine waking up tomorrow morning in New York or Los Angeles or London and seeing crime disappear from your streets. Imagine not hearing stories of people getting robbed or hearing positive stories about prosperity or people that generally care about their neighbors, or police that are trusted. Yes, trusted, not feared, trusted, because they serve the people. This is not some, Orwellian thing that people think. This is not North Korea here. This is a country of 1.4 billion, 1.5 billion that has seen and brought hundreds and hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. I live not in the tier 1 city of Shanghai, but I'll tell you, Chongqing, China, 30-some million people, 20, 30 years ago, looks nothing like this. It does today. It's absolutely amazing what has happened here. This is a miracle. This is a miracle.
Oh, definitely. I mean, in the transformation in China is incredible to see. And, for those of you, I think many people follow our channels, Alex, to get the insights into China, to really see that real China, to see the on the ground vlogs that we do in China, to get that different perspective. I want to bring up an interesting story. So when I was in Guangzhou this summer, and this is an interesting thing for that not many people know. When you're an American and you're traveling in China, one of the common questions that Chinese people will ask is, where are you from? Whenever you say America, almost always, I would say probably 7 out of 10 times, the first thing that Chinese people will respond is they always are very curious about guns. So they'll say, hey, tell me about the gun culture in America, or do you own a gun? What is that? And it's a uniquely American thing, right? If you're German, if you're New Zealand, if you're Australian, Canadian, they're not going to ask you that question. But Chinese people associate, America with guns. And so I was chatting with a security guard. It was outside the apartment complex that we were staying with my family, in Guangzhou. And he said, "Why do you guys have guns in America?" And I told him, I said, "Well, in America, this is what American people think. American people think that guns equal freedom." And he said, "How does guns equal freedom? That doesn't make sense to me." And I said, "Well, basically in America, the thought is that if we have guns, we can keep the government in line. So, the thought process here is that, basically, the government won't be able to overpower the citizens because the citizens could rise up, and these guns is what keeps the government in check to make sure that they serve the people." And I said that's the theory. But he said, "But I don't understand that because you have so many gun crimes in America and you don't have safety." And he said, "If you don't have safety, how do you have freedom?" And I thought that was, and again, this is a security guard. This is a security guard working at the front door of the entrance. So, just a normal guy in China. I would say, this guy would not be university educated, just a kind of a common guy with a common job. Lovely guy, nothing against him or anything, but it was awesome because, he's able to kind of put together the pieces to come with a very logical conclusion. And actually, Alex, I'm making a video this week about freedom in China, answering that question: is there freedom in China? And kind of the thing, what I think we need to really understand is that freedom means different things to different people. If you talk to Americans, there's going to be many right-wing or many more right-leaning people in this country that even after the death of Charlie Kirk will still say, we need guns, we need the Second Amendment, guns does give us freedom, guns keep us safe. And so that is the world that they live in. Most of those people have not traveled outside of the US. Again, you don't know about your country until you can really go outside and see the world from a different perspective. My viewpoint on that changed tremendously when I relocated from Florida, my home state, and I actually moved to Shanghai at the age of 23. And I realized, wow, this is amazing to have, this is a tremendous amount of freedom, to be able to have safety. It's a great freedom. And I don't agree with the sentiment that, we have guns in America so we can keep our government in check. I don't think the U.S. government is fearing citizens with guns. I don't think that's how that works here. Last time I checked, the United States has a pretty damn powerful military, one of the most powerful in the world. We could have that debate, whether it's China or the United States. Obviously, both are big military powers. I don't think the president is scared of U.S. citizens with guns. But this is the kind of this theory, and this is why I find it so much fun to travel around the world and to have these perspectives. And Alex, that's what we do on our YouTube channels, is to try to bring in different perspectives, different nuance, so that people can understand this. And, I did see a comment earlier. I'm going to just kind of bring this up before I forget this. I don't know if you saw this, Alex. Did you see the comments from the governor of Utah? Did you see his comments about the shooter? Yeah, I don't know.
Tell me.
Okay.
Tell me.
So he said, this is quite ridiculous. He said, after the shooting happened, I was praying every single day that this shooter would not be one of us. I was praying that he would be at least from a different state, hopefully from a different country, because this is not America. And so that was a very controversial statement, because obviously he's wanting to, say that hopefully it's a person of color, or maybe it's an immigrant. We are going through a very difficult thing right now where we're having this very much an anti-immigrant movement here in the United States, which is a horrible thing I'm very much against, because of course, all of us are immigrants in the United States. My family, both sides, my mother's side and my father's side, are immigrants from Germany. My mother, to this day, is a German national. She is not a U.S. citizen. She is an immigrant inside the United States. She's been living in the United States for 50 years, still has not actually given up her German passport, still has not acquired a U.S. citizenship. So, it's remarkable when we are taking this policy of I've had some crazy things, Alex, in the last few months. I've had people email me saying, Cyrus, the best thing that America could do is we should kick out every single Chinese person in this country. And I'm thinking, how can you possibly say that as a U.S. citizen, where our foundation is to welcome people from other countries? That's how we built this nation up. And you have so many Chinese, ethnically Chinese people that are naturalized U.S. citizens. You even talk like that is just pure ridiculousness. But that was a very difficult statement to hear from the Utah governor, who basically said, I hope he's not one of us. I hope he's a foreigner. But let's be honest, it's the Americans that commit these crimes. Look at the track record of these assassinations, these mass killings. It's not foreigners that are doing this in America. It's 100%. A shooting happens in America, it's always a U.S. citizen that's doing it. And unfortunately, it is someone that I think that you hit the nail on the head, that has been manipulated by the media, has been, poisoned with
pharmaceuticals,
pharmaceuticals, everything.
You name it. Let's thank you for that, Cyrus. Always love hearing you chat, my friend. You see it along the bottom of the screen here, and this is a good time for me to bring in two more guests on the show here. The $8 trillion estimate for the post 9/11 wars, from the costs from the wars projected at Brown University, is a comprehensive figure that not only includes the direct costs of wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, but also related counterterrorism efforts increased. As I said, America's sick. When you're spending $8 trillion to try to cure everybody, well, let's hear about it from the battle lines here. We're going to bring in Patrick Lancaster and Carl Zha onto the program. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Patrick, I'm going to, Cyrus and I have talked about this many times about how, and good to see you, my friend, how ill America has been. But you're a guy that is right down there on the front lines. You're seeing casualties. You're seeing real life as it happens. You're seeing loss of life, whether it's kids being, blown up in schools, which I witnessed when I was there when I went to a school that was bombed in about 2015, 16 in Donbass. But I mean, what does the future hold for people in that area of the world? What kind of psychological, how are they dealing with it over there? I mean, that is real life. We might say real life America. That's one thing. Or first world problem, that's one thing. But then we talk about Donbass, which is very real. People dying down there. How are people handling that? Might be a bit delayed.
Hi, guys. Thanks for being on. It's great to see you all again. So really great to see you guys. And good question. Unfortunately, the effect on the civilians, and well, not only civilians, but the soldiers, because most male people of age in Donbass have fought at one time or another in the battles in the last 11 years. And unfortunately, most of the population in some form or another does have PTSD. It really depends on where they're from. The front line has gotten so big over the years. Some have had it a lot worse than others. But if we look at where I've spent most of my time in the first 8 years of the war, from 2014 till 2022 in Donetsk, most people that live in Donetsk have some sort of a moment in their memory where they received trauma directly from battle in the war. I mean, this isn't something that's happened to some people and other people haven't. But depending on what neighborhood you lived in or live in, it was either a daily basis or weekly or monthly basis. Like, for instance, my wife's family home was destroyed at the beginning in 2014. Luckily, they made it out alive. Many of her neighbors didn't, but members of her family have PTSD. Everybody has it in one way or another. But then you've got other areas like, for example, Belgorod, where I'm currently right now. I'm a little bit closer to the front line, but the city of Belgorod came later to the war, just under 2 years ago. And hasn't quite affected them as much as it affected places like Donetsk and Lugansk. Don't get me wrong, there's been a lot of effect on the civilians here. But in places directly in Donbass, like Donetsk, the people have kind of gone through the different phases. In 2014, it was, war started, close all the shops, close all the doors and windows, stop life. The police force stopped, everything stopped. And then slowly they became used to it. Okay, this is the fact. We live in war now. And they got, kind of numb to the fact and got better at handling it for the most part, even though their neighbors were dying every day. Every family has some member of their family or a close family friend that has been seriously injured or killed in the war, unfortunately. And it's just the life they live in. But yeah, that covers that, I guess.
My question, and anybody else on the panel that has a question to ask Patrick about this, but my question is going to be, when this is all done, we're seeing an entire region that has been absolutely shell-shocked and terrored for 11 plus years now. How do we get past that?
How do we get past that?
Is that for me, Alex? Sorry, you broke up a little bit there.
That was for you. Sorry, I know you're on a bit of a delay, but I mean, how are they going to move on with their life?
So the people try. As I said, like in Donetsk, they've gotten numb to the war. Here in Belgorod, I've gone to the stores here, the shops, and the problem here in Belgorod is the constant incoming drones. Almost every morning this week, there's been incoming drones coming across the front line, coming across the border into Russia from the Kharkov region, and the reactions you see on this, then what happens in Donetsk. The people in Donetsk, to go on your question, they have moved forward, but like I said, they've got used to it. They've moved forward with the war. How is that city going to be once there is peace? Whenever that happens, whether it's next year or in 10 years, it's going to be a big change for the population, not only for the fact that it's going to be peace, but economically as well, because a huge part of the male population are soldiers in the Russian military, the locals in Donetsk and Donbass, what the West calls Ukraine. They're fighters that are employed by the Russian military, and they get paid for the area, for the region, very well. I mean, Russia pays between $2,000, actually about $2,500 to $5,000 a month. And so when the war does stop, that combat pay is going to stop, and it's going to bring reverse inflation a bit, because once the war started, Russia came in and started paying these people that had been fighting for 10 years for almost nothing. They were getting about 15 to 20,000 rubles, which was about $200 a month. And their pay got changed from $200 a month to sometimes 4,000 or 5,000. That really increased the inflation of the city in Donbass hugely. So how the population is going to get affected, possibly negatively, after the war stops is going to be interesting to see.
Okay, well, I'm going to then move on to maybe Carl to get, and I want to go a bit deeper with this question, then I'm going to hand it back to Cyrus. But Carl, China just put on military display here a few weeks ago. We saw it in Beijing. Amazing. I've seen a lot more of the hardware actually in the Zhuhai Air Show. The Chinese, they fought. There was a massive war of aggression from Japanese occupation in that area. My question again is, when a nation has been hit that hard, losing casualties, constant bombing. I don't know if people are aware of this, but Chongqing was one of the most bombed cities on the planet. 6.5 years relentless aerial bombardment from the Japanese. My question to add, and thank you very much for the answer with that, Patrick, but my question is, psychologically, after you've been bombed for 6.5 years, what happens to the soul of a person when it's all over? The carnal damage that it causes on a nation. To me, China put its head down and got on with hard times, and look where they are today. What are your thoughts, and maybe some observations of the world conflicts, even in Gaza?
Well, I mean, in China's case, Chinese people are very resilient. They, immediately after World War II, they went through a catastrophic civil war, but they were able to bounce back from that because Chinese people were united to look forward to a better future. I remember, so that's the time when my parents' generation were born, right? My dad's generation, all their names were like, many of them were given like very patriotic name. My dad's name literally means a strong China, and his brother's name means to build China. And this is very typical for people who are born in the 1950s. because people are looking to rebuild their lives, and they want to build China back stronger and better than before, because they know if China was weak, you will be bullied, you will be invaded, you will be brutalized. So it has been the dream of the Chinese people for the past century to build a prosperous country and strong military. They call it 富国强兵, and they have done that. This was shown during the parade that we saw. The parade was supposed to send a strong message, basically, particular to the United States, said China can no longer be contained. And, this is our coming out party. In a way, it's analogous to kind of the 2008 Olympics, right? People still remember the opening ceremony of 2008 Olympics. Nobody expected that, and people were wow. And that's what this latest parade was designed to do. It was designed to wow people and realize that China has arrived on the world stage. And I think, even people in Donbass can look forward to that, because we can see what happened in Chechnya, for example. Chechnya, the Grozny downtown was totally pulverized during the two Chechen wars. And today, it has been completely rebuilt. And we saw that in Mariupol as well. So I think when the war is over, at least the Russian government will have the resources and the political will to rebuild. And I think that's very important, to have the political will to rebuild. I think one of the problems with America, since this is how we started the show, is the American leadership right now is not really invested in bettering the country. There's too many U.S. politicians who are more interested to line their own pockets than actually to invest into making America a better place, despite all these talks, all these slogans about build America better. Nothing came out of that, because they, unlike the leadership of, say, China and Russia, United States, the U.S. elite haven't really, it seems like they don't really care. It seems like they, despite their rhetorics, it seems like they don't really care to have a grand national project that's to invest in the people in America to make it a better place. And this is why U.S. is in such a dark place right now, is because there's really no cohesive community anymore. This is just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on that. No, Carl, I think you've hit the nail on the head there, because that's where we've had an interesting debate. I was Carl, before you joined, I was talking about on Twitter. I've been very active on Twitter the last couple of days, because there's been obviously there's been a lot of people that are now starting to blame China, for this divide in America, and even taking it as far as saying, this shooter that took out Charlie Kirk, obviously influence from China. They're all about their fat. This is communism. This is Chairman Mao's ideology coming back to us. It's the Red Scare, and I would respond to these people, and I said, no, the issue right now is that you have a very frustrated American population, because we have a political system that does not provide any hope. Because as you and I know, Carl, I mean, we in the United States, it really doesn't matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat. It doesn't matter who wins the United States presidency. We know that the military-industrial complex will continue to churn. We know that wars around the world will continue to go. We look at international situations where, again, we prioritize all of these efforts around the world, but what are our politicians doing for us? And that's the frustration. And I think that's where people are getting, very pissed off, because they're, and I've seen a lot of people starting to really question, Israel. Why are we supporting? Why do we have all of this tremendous amount of support, financial support, and everything support for Israel? And it was interesting, around Independence Day, July 4th, the big holiday, 4th of July in the United States, I saw an unprecedented amount of tweets and people really saying, we can't celebrate independence right now because we're not truly independent. We're subservient to Israel because they control us so much. And that was really the first time I've ever really seen a lot of people starting to speak out about that. But yeah, I think that's where people are frustrated in the politics, because we don't have a government that serves the people. obviously, I think this entire U.S. political system is beyond corrupt. There's no future in it, because even when you're elected, what is the primary goal of a senator when he gets elected? Well, it's just to stay elected, right? So it's immediately, it's almost day one, you're already starting to talk about, well, what can we talk about next to make sure that we keep the people and get their vote? It's securing that vote to make sure that I can keep my seat, and me. And so that's how you have these senators that, stay in power for a long time, no real change, nothing really done. And yet, we see some of the most ridiculous bills. I mean, I don't know if you guys saw this. I tweeted this out this morning. There's a new bill on the floor that would give Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, the power to revoke U.S. passports if they violate, speech, that the U.S. government does not approve of. And so, it's like, is that where we are going right now in America? I mean, I don't think there's any chance that bill gets passed, but for even that bill to be proposed as legislation in the United States just shows you how ridiculous the direction our country is going right now. And quite honestly, it's why a lot of countries around the world are not taking us serious. And I've said that before. I don't think the U.S. government is a serious government right now. I mean, it's a clown show. And and I think that's where the frustration is coming into America. That's why the society is divided. That's why the left are getting more radicalized. That's why the right are getting more radicalized. Both sides are getting more radicalized and more extreme. And, I'm going to just wrap up my little segment here with just, my biggest, the sorrow that I see is, at the end of the day, Charlie Kirk, whether you like him or hate him, he is a U.S. citizen. He is somebody that was practicing his free speech, and, he was gunned down, because of it. Again, I'm not here to say, he was right or wrong, but, that's supposed to be the backbone of American society. But that just shows you, it just gives you a snapshot of where we are in the country right now. Stability would not be the word I would use to describe it.
And what do our government do? It uses this opportunity to crack down further on the freedom of speech. I mean, that's what the politicians do right now. They serve to not to unite, but to divide the people, because they know by dividing the people, that's how they will guarantee at least 50% of the vote, and it only makes the matters worse. So I agree absolutely 100% with what you just said, Cyrus.
Yeah, thanks, Carl. Good to see you guys again. This is great to have all four of us back on the stream. It's been a while, guys.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I think another thing that needs to be mentioned is we have not seen, and a lot of people will probably agree, and congratulations, everybody. We got over 3,000 people watching now. I'm a guy that looks at the economy all of the time. And when you start to see people get squeezed, they go home, they sit in their home, and they say, how am I going to get out of this? How many years mortgage do I have? How am I going to pay the bills? Am I going to wind up on the street? I mean, these are very real life issues with people. And then we wonder why people lose their shit.
Yeah.
When I was a young guy, yeah, I could go out and I could have a drink at the bar and feel good. And I would understand that might mean a couple more hours work at McDonald's, to go out and have a good time on a Friday night. But you're telling a young generation that needs to let loose, needs to go out and be human beings and have human interactions, that, well, if you do want to go out and have a drink, well, that's $50 to get into the taxi. And maybe you might get into the club. You might not, because you might not be dressed that well. Once you're in there, you spend another $100 and maybe another $50 to get home. And no, just like that, you're out. Now, you guys might say, where are you going with this? I saw a report, and Cyrus, you might know about this. You got some connections to Germany. The Berlin night scene is it's about to collapse. Now, how is that relevant? Why is that relevant? It's showing you that society that used to enjoy communicating with people can't. They don't want to meet up in these destinations anymore. Either it's financial or it's human beings that are migrating into something else. Now, is being at home in a room with four walls, not having human interaction good? What happens? They turn on the internet, no filter, zero government. Oh, we have the freedom of speech. We can watch what we want to watch. No one's going to tell me what to watch. And then everybody wakes up and says, well, how did this happen? Why did this happen? Why are these people against those people? We are dealing with young minds here. And the young minds know that any country that spends $8 trillion on wars, they're going to be screwed growing up financially. Either they're going to inherit their home, or they're going to be on the goddamn street, or they're just going to be where most of America is right now, in limbo. I do not see a positive outcome here in the next 12 months here. Once these financial markets start to come off, and Cyrus, you're in Vancouver, right? See what happened to the condo market in Vancouver in the last 6 months? Mm-hmm. Collapse. So when we're seeing real estate markets, financial markets, that will spill over to the parents. The parents will then spill that stress on to the kids. And kids pick up everything, man. Kids will know if mom and dad can't make that mortgage payment when they're 10 or 11 or 12 years old. They'll see it right at the kitchen table.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm talking about. That's the real issues. And the solution to that would probably be, well, let's just pump them up with more SSRIs. Let's get them some more antidepressants. Let's throw them on some anti-anxiety pills. And let's see if we can break that annual record of 6.7 billion prescriptions next year. Wow. Anybody take over?
I quoted, I actually on 9/11, I quoted Hunter Thompson, who he wrote 2 weeks after 9/11 happened. And the very prophetic words. He said, the poor bastards that will forever be known as Gen Z are doomed to be the first generation of Americans who will grow up with a lower standard of living than their parents enjoy. And that's a problem. That is a problem. The youth do not have a better future to look forward to. They're looking at increasingly worsening economic prospect. And they see their politicians are not doing anything to address it. This is in combined with the issue of alienation that you mentioned, Alex. I mean, it's a worsening spiral.
And I think it to piggyback on that, Carl, is when you look at the state of New York and you look at this mayor candidate, right, and how he's rising up in power. And so this is a very interesting story that we're going to see to develop. So we have, a very much a socialist candidate that is coming up right now in New York City. Has some very interesting ideas, on how he wants to fix America. And of course, you have the older, let's say the Republicans and the right wing is, very, very scared of this gentleman, saying that this guy would be the worst thing for New York City. But the key thing is you've hit the nail on the head, is the younger generation, right? Under the age of 30, this guy is extremely popular because they're looking at it as a system of, what's currently happening, what's working, the system right now is not working. Right. And it's not working for Gen Z. It's not working for the younger generation. And we got to take a chance. We got to do something to break the mold and do something to reverse this. And the other thing I think that's very interesting is because in the last 2 years specifically, all of us have been to China. All of us, Patrick, we got to see you in China, over the summer. And, I think that was your first time, back to China, and you were at Chongqing, and, we're just like, wow, this is really, it's probably very different than you would have thought as well. But we're seeing this, I think 2025 has been an amazing year for China. We've seen the Red Note. I mean, let's talk about Red Note at the beginning of the year, where millions of Americans are exposed to the real life in China, finally being able to see and interact with Chinese people. And they're thinking, wait a second, you're paying that much a month for that quality apartment in that city? You're going to that restaurant for that price? Like, this is what you're doing? Like, this is a 8:30 at night in Beijing. There's all these people in a park, 10:30 at night. Girls are walking around alone, rollerblading at night because, how can you do that? Well, that's China. It's safe, So they're starting to see a very different thing, and I think people, the younger generation, are fascinated. I mean, I've seen a plethora of new China content from younger creators exploding on Instagram. and something that I've never really seen in the last, 5 years, but in the last 5 months, I've just seen more and more people starting to go to China, showcasing that. And I think that's where people are starting to see, like, hey, China has a government that actually does put people first. And actually, there's tangible results. I talked earlier in the meeting, stream, where, if you go to these 5th, 6th tier villages, and sometimes I'll get criticized. They say, well, Cyrus, you were in Guangzhou this summer. That's not the real China. That's just a big tier city. No different than Shanghai. You should go to the poor villages in China, and then you'll see the real China. You'll see the Chinese people there. They don't like Chinese government. Well, no, actually, that's where the highest support of the Chinese government is in the smaller villages, because that's where the government is prioritizing, right? If you're Shanghai, you're already developed, really well. They're going to continue to develop, but there's a lot more focus on the generation, or the poor people that need more financial help, that need to get out of the village and have better roads, have better schools, have more economic prosperity, and a chance for a better life in the future. And I think that's where, America, unfortunately, we're a very selfish society. I think that's where we don't have this community perspective. Certainly from our government. Our government, we can track, Alex, you're a stock guy. You got to admire the stock returns of Nancy Pelosi. Look at, she's got to be, move over Warren Buffett. She's the best stock trader of all time. But you can see how she's maximized her net worth. And that is just a result of, U.S. politicians. They're all in it. They all have, their ability to make money. It's not serving the people. There's no serving the people and trying to make U.S. citizens' lives better. It's how can I empower myself, profit off the system. And, that's why we even see this with, like, General Spalding, who's on Twitter, every day talking about the China threat. And it was so funny. He tweeted Elon Musk, and he's like, Elon, we need to have a group that organizes, against China. By the way, I would love to be heading this, and, I can work with the military industrial context. Please contact me. I would love to serve our country. I'm like, oh, so just looking for another paid gig. This is why you're promoting the China threat, because you want to get paid to do it. It's ridiculous.
An interesting point I want to bring up with Patrick is, we chat about the divided America. You're an American. You've been covering this conflict between the Ukraine and Russian for over 11 years now. A lot of American money has been spent down there. A lot. Okay. And people are asking themselves, what did we get for this? And you're an American. This is the best person to ask from me. The money that the U.S. government spent, is it going to bring peace in that area? Are the Russians afraid of Trump's next step? If this conflict gets solved, I think we're on the way to calming things down in the world. But if it doesn't, where are we going to be here in the next few months, buddy? We were told this was going to be over in 24 hours, man.
Yeah. Well, obviously, the United States has given a lot of funds to Ukraine. And let's just go from 2022. It started before that with Trump's famous "I gave them javelins" deal. But let's go from 2022, where everybody said the war was going to be over in 3 days. U.S. led the charge in giving the funds to Ukraine, the lethal aid. And within days, I saw the results of this Western lethal aid in civilian areas. Of course, also they landed on military, but no question, I personally have seen hundreds of Western supplied ammunition landing in the living rooms of civilians in the war zone, not only in main Russia, big Russia, but also in the areas where the local population considers it Russia, but West considers it part of Ukraine. There's no question, day in and day out, Western supplied weapons hitting civilian targets randomly are targeted. And this aid from the West, from the United States, billions of dollars, the main impact, not only that it landed in civilian homes and killed civilians every day, but also it kept the war going, and it's directly responsible for hundreds of thousands of deaths, both deaths on the Russian side, civilians and military, and on the Ukrainian side. There's no question that this war would have been over. Okay, maybe not in the first 3 days, like General Miley, I believe, predicted, but not 3.5 years, not 4 years, not 5 years, not 10 years. The war would have been over, and hundreds of thousands of less people would have lost their lives, and hundreds of thousands of families wouldn't have lost their livelihood. And this is a fact. There's no question about
it. Carl.
I guess okay.
Cyrus, go ahead. Go ahead, Cyrus. First up to bat, Cyrus. Oh, we might have lost him here.
No,
okay.
Sorry.
Just a connection there. Go ahead, Cyrus.
No, I just want to bring a panel up. Carl, you can take this question, or just kind of to the panel. I want to talk about this. The recent news is, so what Trump is now saying, he's going to threaten these sanctions, right? 100% sanctions on any country, over NATO, right? And I want to get your guys' opinion on that. I think that's the biggest story where, Trump is basically going to threaten the European Union, saying that I'm going to put 100% sanctions on you if you continue to buy Russian oil. Same for China, same for India. Let's talk about the impact of that and how that's going to influence this war, and is this, are we going to see Trump tacoing out again?
I mean, this is an act of desperation. I mean, why is Trump doing that? Is because Trump has realized he can't direct terms of peace to Russia. I think Trump still very much like to wrap up the war in Ukraine, but he wants to wrap up the war on America's terms, on NATO's terms. But you don't get to do that if you are not winning in the battlefield. Russia has all the advantage and all the initiative in the battlefield. Right. And the Trump administration hasn't realized that it's not in a position to dictate terms. So now Trump is playing the hardball, right? Like he talked about in the Arts of Deal, he will raise up a lot of pressure, and by pressure, he can't pressure Russia directly. And he can't pressure China directly either, because, we have tried that trade war back in May when Chinese ships simply stopped coming to Port of Los Angeles. So there was widespread panic. So he can't really go too hard on China. He thinks India and EU, they are the weaker links. This is why it's going after them over the purchase of Russian oil to indirectly pressure Russia. But that's not going to work. I mean, India already have staked out their the Indian Prime Minister Modi made a show of holding hands with Xi Jinping and Putin during the SCO summit, and had a very picture of himself sitting with Putin inside the limo. India is just saying we're not going to give up our strategic autonomy. We're not a pawn in the grand chessboard of the United States. We are a great power ourselves, and we get to do what we think is best for our national interest. Europeans, on the other side, they have much less backbone than the Indians. They will bend over and they will bend whichever way for Trump, like they did, lining up like school children waiting to be scouted in the White House. So that's where I think Trump will continue to get his way in Europe, just because the European leaders, they have no backbones, and the ones who are in the EU are usually selected to be where they are because they serve as voice of Washington in Europe. I'm talking about people like von der Leyen. So, Europe is a hopeless case. And unfortunately, because European autonomy, strategic autonomy will actually serve, I think, the greater goods of the world. But I just don't see that's happening right now.
Yeah.
It's interesting how he mentions he wants Europeans to put the sanctions on. And it's clear why he's saying that, Cyrus, instead of him saying the United States will put the sanctions on. He wants the Europeans to put it on, because if he puts it on in America, remember, these tariffs are paid on import, not export. So, for example, somebody in the ports of California that have, let's say, a nice shipment coming in for the Christmas holidays, it's a $50,000 or $60,000 shipment. You slam 200% tariffs on that. That comes $180,000 overnight. Throw in a bit of sales tax on there. That's fine. Not just that. Now, if the Europeans do it, it's not affecting the Trump economy. The other thing is now the Europeans are playing a little bit of hardball with him, saying, wait a minute, we can't ship the de minimis packages to the United States, the $800 threshold. So we're going to put a bit of a pause on that now. So you got 21 carriers, postal carriers across Europe refusing to ship anything pretty much to the United States. Last year, it was 1.3 billion packages. Right now, it's down over 81%. That is going to come out somewhere in the trade in the United States. Now, if that money goes into the bank, he might say, oh, great, look at all the money we got in tariffs. The average person is going to say, well, wait a minute, my monthly statement's down. I can't spend that much anymore. What are we going to do? I don't know. Let's bring in AI to into a company and let's lay off some staff. He will not bring if he brings this into America and he puts the tariffs on Russia or any nation that are trading Russian oil, it's game over. It will be game over in 90 days for the U.S. economy. Say goodbye to the S&P, say goodbye to the NASDAQ, and say goodbye to the Dow Jones, because that market is TKO'd. It's going to be totally knocked out.
Yeah, and we saw that as well with in April. I mean, we saw that in April with as soon as these tariffs come in. And I mean, the interesting thing is that we have to also look at Donald Trump. Look at, every couple months, it's like I've given another 90-day extension to China, another 90-day. I think we're in the third 90-day extension to China right now on these tariffs. So, I was brought up that point. I was seeing another comments on Twitter where it's like, hey, what happened about that TikTok ban? What I thought that was a 90-day thing as well. And I said, yeah, you realize, for Donald Trump, there's certain countries that you can bully around. Trump can certainly bully around Canada because Canada is just not in a financial position to really have leverage against the United States. And I think I agree with Alex. I agree. This is why he's looking at India, why he's looking at the EU as people as countries that have potential to bully. But as Carl pointed out very greatly, yeah, India said, no, take that and shove it. We're not playing that game. And, and I don't know if you saw that. There was a report. Modi rejected 4 phone calls from Trump. 4 phone calls he rejected. And exactly, he got on a plane, flew to Tianjin, in a limousine. And I think in a limousine with Putin. And I think he was very deliberate in his tweets. He's showing a smiling photo of him and Putin. And it's like, always great to meet with my great friend, Putin here to discuss this. I mean, I take that as jabs to the United States. I mean, there's a purpose behind those tweets. I don't think it's just like him really wanting to document his journey there. I think it's like, I need to send the United States a signal. Most importantly, I want to send Donald Trump a signal. And, I made a video that went, pretty viral here on YouTube talking about India. And I had a tremendous amount of Indian people in the comment section, really, verifying that, saying like, look, we take this as an attack on our national sovereignty. Who are you to dictate us, saying that we are not allowed to buy oil? Well, first of all, let's not forget the European Union is like India's #1 customer. So even though the Europeans are not buying Russian oil, well, they're technically just buying it through India as a third party. And the other thing is and this is something that not many people know, the United States to this day, we have always been importing hundreds of millions of dollars worth of uranium from Russia. That has been continuous because we can't source the uranium. About 22% of the power generated in the United States is nuclear, and we get that uranium from Russia. We can't shut that off. We can't shut that down, And so, New York Times actually broke an amazing story where it's like, okay, we're wanting to sanction Russia, but do you know that we're actually still every single month sending them a ton of money to buy this uranium? So how do we criticize India for buying oil when we're buying uranium? It just doesn't make sense. And I think this is where, Donald Trump is playing a game that he can't win. And again, and that's where you come in, Alex, with your point of saying this is why he's asking the EU to do it. You guys sanction him. You guys do this because we realize we can. And we saw that in April.
Yeah, he's got no choice. He's surrounded by it. And world trade is world trade, man. he may regret when he says, "Oh, I love the word tariffs." No, that word tariffs is going to be haunting every American here in the next 90 days. I hope he does it. I hope he says, "Oh, yeah, let's go. Let's let it rip, and let's sanction China." Yeah, that's a real smart move, guy. Don't get me wrong. I get his America first. I understand that. But as you said, Cyrus, the Chinese are very, very patriotic to their country.
100%.
Tomorrow morning, if they start saying, "Wait a minute, this ain't right," what? United States has put 100% tariff tax on Brazil. Okay, well, we'll send a delegation of Chinese businessmen over to Brazil to then sign the deals with the Brazilian government to export that to China. What did the Canadians do? They sent an envoy over last week. The Canadians, they want to talk NEVs now. They want to talk about zero tax on canola oil. They want to talk about selling their cattle and beef to China. Why? Because there's 1.4 billion people here. So until America starts building TVs, makes its own mobile phones, and builds refrigerators, and can feed itself and stop taking part in all these wars, no, guys, it ain't going to work. You're not going to tariff the people that are keeping your lifeline together. And the Chinese tomorrow morning could say, "You know what? And all these thousands of Starbucks out here, we ain't going anymore. All these Apple stores out here, we're not buying anymore. All these Nikes, no thanks. Ask the NBA. Maybe we'll just cancel all our NBA subscriptions to the NBA. Maybe we'll not watch American football anymore and pay all these subscription fees. Maybe we won't buy American video games or anything like that." They can do it in the drop of a hat here. I've seen it done. And careful what he wishes for. Careful.
But Alex, you talk about how this is going to bring down the economy, but the U.S. economy has been running on vapor for a long time now. I mean, it's been propped up by money printing. This is why Trump has been yelling at the feds, to get them to loosen up. So I think they can still keep the game running a little bit longer as long as they keep on printing money, right? I mean, it's not going to be good for people who hold U.S. dollar asset, because U.S. dollar is going to trend down, but that's I don't see any way out of it. That's most realistic way is they're going to try to get out of this tremendous deficit by continuing money printing.
We're gonna sort of just cut you off there. We're gonna say goodbye to Patrick. He's going out back into serious business here. So Patrick, stay safe, be safe. I will try to call you if possible. Your mobile will be on. Be safe. From all of us here, we really respect what you do and really appreciate you coming on to this program in short notice and letting us know what is happening down in that area. Thanks again. If you want to just say anything to the audience, please go for it.
All right. Thanks a lot, Alex. It's great to see you guys again, Cyrus. Great to see you, Carl. As for the audience, as I say in most of my reports, get as much information from as many different sources as possible, and that includes us, your channel, Alex, Cyrus, Carl, because not one source has all the information. So think outside the box. Whether it's about the unfortunate assassination of Charlie Kirk or the war in Ukraine, our local news. As you said, I've got to head out. So great to see you guys. Great to talk to your audience, and hope to do this very, very soon. So we'll see you guys later.
Thanks, Patrick.
Take care, Patrick.
And everybody, if you want to visit Patrick Lancaster's channel, just Patrick Lancaster, go to him on YouTube. He's everywhere. Congratulations on breaking that 1 million, right? You hit 1 million?
All in, got over 1 million. Still just over 900,000 on YouTube, but all in with Twitter and everything, just over 1 million. So thanks. Yeah, I'm happy about it.
You and Cyrus can battle it out. Fantastic. Okay, Patrick, we'll see you later. Take care, buddy. I'll call you in a bit. Cheers.
All right. See you guys later.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Oh, gentlemen. So I really think we're going to be in for a barnstorm of a quarter coming up here. Cyrus, you made those comments about, tariffs. How much are they going to actually impact, and will countries go through with it? Who's going to bluff? I mean, America has bluffed. It showed. It blinked, and I think the world economy right now, China's just saying, "Hey guys, do what you want to do. I mean, go for it. I mean,
honestly,
500% tariff. We don't care."
I mean, honestly, I mean, we're all on the same page on this. I feel. I mean, we've seen nothing but talk going out from Donald Trump, right? I mean, it's just a consistent theme where there's no clear policy. Donald Trump likes to throw a bunch of stuff against the wall, see what sticks. And I think he tried to bully China, right? It was 50%. Now it's 100. Now it's 125. Okay, we're doing 225. It's and to your point, right? He's like, we'll make it 1,000. Who cares? We don't really care, because the other thing is that China has options, right? I mean, when you're the top trading partner for the 120 countries around the world, and you know what? Okay, yes, the United States does make up, a good portion of exports, but it's not everything to China. And China's going to say, well, you know what? ASEAN, that is our network that we trade the most with, right? We have this growing group of countries throughout Southeast Asia. We can double down and increase more exports there. We have Australia. I think one of the biggest underrated stories is the pivot from Australia, and how, I mean, just a few years ago, remember Scott Morrison, I mean, Prime Minister of Australia, he was extremely anti-China. And I think the Australian Prime Minister, the current one, has made, I don't know, I think he's made 3 visits to China in the last 6 months, something like that. I mean, he's very, very pro-China, and, pro-China engagement, saying like, look, this is what is best for our country. And I think what's happening, and this is a problem for the United States, a problem for U.S. citizens, is that they fail to see what's happening around the globe. They fail to see the shifts in the global South. Anytime I make a video on BRICS, anytime I make a video on the global South, it's amazing to see the comments, because you see comments from people around the globe, people in Uganda, people in, Thailand and other places where people are saying, look, we're all about the global South. We're all about, this world outside of the United States, that they're the supreme being. And, people are very sick and tired of that, because we've seen the United States actions on the international stage. And again, this is where my message to my fellow U.S. citizens is: we need to start looking from within. We have to really start holding our politicians accountable. And you need to understand that since Donald Trump became elected, the popularity of the United States has decreased. I have a very close friend of mine that's in Norway, and he said, Cyrus, everybody in our community, the discussion, as the Europeans, they're very famous. Throughout Europe, everybody goes on holiday in the summer. And the talk throughout Europe is, well, where do we want to go for the summer holiday? I know one country I'm not going. It's certainly not the United States this summer. We're not going to be doing that. And we've seen that. I mean, even in Las Vegas, the Las Vegas tourism is absolutely horrible right now. There's if you go to Las Vegas right now, a lot of these major hotels, obviously it's the Strip, the Vegas Strip. It's all about hotels and tourism. I mean, they've fired thousands of people, or laid off rather, laid off thousands of people, because they just can't. They don't have the revenue. They don't have the tourism demand anymore. Canadians are certainly boycotting America right now. Europeans are. And it really should be a pause, for U.S. citizens to think, where are we going right now? What are we doing?
Carl, can you disclose your location?
I'm in Shanghai. I'm in a Shanghai hotel. In fact, before I rushed here to be on the show, I was giving a tour of Shanghai on the street level by the godfather of Chinese hip hop. I
saw that tweet.
Dana. Yeah, Dana. So we were just walking around Shanghai. I mean, it's very obvious to me. Shanghai is where the action is right now. Like, this is why, Cyrus, you talk about travel. People should travel to China and see for themselves, where the future
100%.
is. Every time I come to China, I was here last April. China is back. China is recovering now from kind of the post-COVID slump, and I walk around, see all these smartly dressed young people hang about. I mean, Shanghai is a cool, hip city, and it's safe. Like, I can walk around right now in the middle of the night. Zero regards for my personal safety, because I know I will be fine. And I cannot say the same thing about, say, downtown Los Angeles. I lived in LA for a long time. And people should come check out for themselves. Seeing is believing. Let your lying eyes convince you that, China is the future.
Yeah, Carl, to piggyback on that, I made a video last week talking about, the lessons that I've learned in China on my recent visit. And it was just kind of like 5 lessons I learned, and I was comparing the past and the present. I said, I first moved to China in 2007. I mean, I remember when the pollution was so thick at times that you could not see the color of the traffic lights. I mean, as you know, and, Alex, I mean, you've seen it. I mean, at that time, back in the day, I mean, pollution was a real problem. I mean, this is a massive problem, especially for us living in Shanghai, where it certainly affected the quality of your life. And that has been eradicated, right? I mean, and that's a huge story that needs to be told, and how China has been able to do that. And so I said, when you look at these systematic changes, and I said, even I brought up a point. I said, you look at China's 5-year plan. Obviously very famous. Every 5 years, the government comes out and says, here's a list of 8 to 10 objectives that the China is going to work on, the Chinese government is going to work on. The last 5-year plan is point number 5. There's 8 points. Point number 5, increase the life expectancy of the citizens by 1 year. And I just kind of contrasted that, because I said, isn't that amazing? Like, that's what the government is saying to the people. Look, hey, in the next 5 years, we're literally going to create the conditions for you guys to live longer. That's kind of a priority for our government for the next 5 years. We're going to be taking actionable steps to make sure that happens. And I just said, how good would that be in the United States if we had a government that said, hey, if Trump got elected and said, we're going to take a look at that. We want to increase the life expectancy of our citizens and, do things to make that happen. Obviously, the United States government would never do that, because you probably can't profit off of that. It's not a, I mean, how can we make money off of that? You can't. You need to spend money. Well, forget that. We're not doing that. I mean, unless we can find a way to make money off of it. And that's where you just have a total different in society. But I'm encouraged, because I feel the work that all the 3 of us are doing, really showcasing this. And again, we're not alone. The plethora of YouTube videos of travel vloggers, just normal travel vloggers. These are not China vloggers. These are just normal travel vloggers traveling the world. But of course, as Charles said, China has recovered after the COVID dip. Tourism, international tourism, absolutely thriving in China. And people are finally seeing it and saying, wow, this is very different than my perspective. And I have so many comments that I receive where it's like, Cyrus, thanks for telling us about this. Like, I'm going to go to China. Like, I got to go see this for myself. Cyrus, I want to do a 2-week trip to China. Can you recommend where I should go? What should I do? And so I think it's awesome to see, because again, I don't know anybody who's actually gone to China and not come away with a total different perspective of just like, wow, that was amazing. And I even challenged the people. I said, even if you hate China, you should still probably go just to have a look at it, just to kind of understand, if this is your enemy, then, you should go and have a look, go see what the life is. I mean, same thing, Carl, you said, like Shanghai, it's amazing. I mean, it's amazing when you go to walking around the streets and you're seeing, like the fashion trends, these young people, how they're living their life. And I always say there's a lot of happiness. There's a lot of good things happening in China, and the anti-China narrative, it really only hurts us at foreigners, because we kind of brainwash ourselves saying that China is this, and that. Chinese people don't care. We don't care what they think, because Chinese people they're living in China. So you can have whatever perception you have of China. That's your perspective. Guess what? I'm on the ground here in Shanghai. Like Carl said, right? I'm walking around with the OG, hip hop artists in China, but you're having you're on the ground there. What do you care if Americans think that China's, bad or that it's not like what, it's a terrible place. Well, guess what? I'm in Shanghai and I'm staying at a nice hotel, walking around completely safe, going to nice restaurants, seeing a society that is certainly progressing. And so, yeah, you need to go to China, see it for yourself.
Yeah, and the thing is about China is you do see the progress. It's visual. Every 5 years you go to China, you're going to a different place, because the physical infrastructure have changed. Even the people's behavior have changed. I remember early 2000, China is still a bit of a wild, kind of the wild west type of place. People are shoving, don't line up in queues and stuff like that. A lot of that have changed, to my surprise, how, now people are even saying China is a high trust society. You can leave your laptop out in your Starbucks and to hold on your seat. Nobody will take it. But that wasn't always the case. Because I lived in China back in the 80s. Back in the 80s, 90s, they will definitely be stolen. but now,
definitely.
Now there's progress. You can visibly see the progress, both in the physical infrastructure and just like behavior of people. And it's progress for the better. I think that will be very enlightening and refreshing for people outside of China to see, to witness. So you realize, okay, it's not going to the kind of the down spiral that we're witnessing in United States. That's not inevitable. That can be reversed. There can be a society where you can build the society for the better and progress for the better. It is possible. I think people need to see that.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I was in Guangzhou this summer, and like you said, there was motorbikes on the side of the road with the keys in them. People leave the keys in there, and that was, and I mean, I used to drive a motorbike in Shanghai. I had my motorbike stolen multiple times because that was the petty kind of theft that did exist in China. People used to steal the batteries. That's what you used to do. You actually used to take your EV battery out of your motorbike and bring it into your apartment. And, because that's the thing that people would steal, because that's very easy to steal. And so, but now that's completely changed. I don't know if you guys saw that vlog. There was a video on Instagram that went viral where it said, he's like, a guy was testing how long it took to get for his laptop to get stolen. And so he was like, Italy, 32 seconds, France, 22 seconds, UK, 24 seconds. And then he was just like, then he puts it in a cafe in China, and it's just like, all right, I'm waiting 35 minutes now and no one's taking it. So, all right, experiment over. I guess I'll just grab my laptop and leave now. So it's a total, that to me is a big sign of freedom. I mean, when you don't have to worry about that, and it really speaks a lot about society. And I agree. And I like this. I like to see China progressing. And I like what you said, Carl. This. It doesn't have to be like this. This is possible. If we make this a priority and we want to change it.
I think I want to add to the tourism, since I'm working in that sector here, to try to help build this city of Chongqing for sure. But there's a few things that China can learn from its current opening of making visas much easier, making countries travel without going to visa offices or service centers or, even to embassies. China needs to develop their tourism business a little bit more user-friendly. The masters of that have been, over the last decade or 2 decades, has been Thailand. When you go to Thailand, you don't even know that you're going to Thailand. It feels like you're walking into many countries. If you're from Sweden, no problem, they got you covered. United Kingdom, pubs, no problem. I'm not saying that they have to change their food to Western food here, but let's just start at the airport. When you come to an airport, and they've always asked me, they say, Alex, what is something we can do in China to make everybody's visit easier? First of all, help somebody with a payment system at the airport. Number one, they get off the airplane. I had a 75-year-old friend visit me from Canada. It was a perfect case. Never been to China, only heard these terrible things about China. I wanted to change that. He arrived. Before he arrived, he goes, I heard that I'm going to have problems getting money out of the bank machine. How am I going to take a taxi? And it started to dawn on me, whoa. If it wasn't for me here to explain the steps to go through, this is not a great welcome to somebody that's got off a 15-hour flight that opens their phone and says, oh, wait, I can't get access to that webpage. Okay, let me try a bank machine. No bank machines. Can I get a SIM card? 1 a.m? No, they're not open. Okay, now what do I do? So if China really wants to crack this wide open, start at your port of entry, guys. You got lots of people, lots of volunteers. Remember, this is a country that has over 110 million party members. You want to rock and roll this country and make it #1 in tourism with staggering numbers, then get out there in the front line of your airports, welcome us in the country, Help us understand your culture. Don't try to change us. Just help us adapt to the modern cashless society that you have. I'll embrace it. My friend embraced it. In fact, after he was here for 2 weeks, he just said, why am I carrying cash in Canada? Why am I not driving a new energy vehicle?
I think
that's
that's
the point
a
of
great
entry.
point. Yeah, I think that's a great point because they have made some progress already. Now they allow you to link WeChat and Alipay to your foreign bank card, but they could make things more easier, like you said, Alex. If they have actually like information desk people helping you to set up. Even me, I am fluent in Chinese language. I set up my Alipay with my foreign bank card in Bali before I left. But I didn't realize I have to verify my account. So when to purchase my SIM card, so they do have a SIM card booth at the Shanghai airport. When I went to purchase SIM card, I tried to pay with Alipay because I set it up with my Citibank card. It got declined because it says suspicious activity. I have to like spend like 10 minutes trying to figure out what's going on. It turns out I just need to, upload my picture, my ID, and so to verify my account. But if there's someone who can guide you through that process, that would be super helpful, I think.
Just top up cards. Sell me a top up.
Yeah.
Sell me a top up card. I'll buy it. Starbucks are the kings with it. They love people buying top up cards because they don't use them all and they expire and they put the money in the balance sheets. But anyway, guys, that's great. I'm going to pass this over to Cyrus I think we're going to wind it up here pretty quick. Cyrus, we're going to pass it over to you, the mic.
Absolutely. Well, guys, thanks for coming on the stream. Let's do a little bit more regular of this. I know all of us are traveling a lot and we've got busy schedules, but I think it's always important to I know the fans like it when we can have this chat. And I know, Carl, you're streaming over there on Twitter as well. So just wherever you're tuning in from, we've had, 3,000-4,000 people tuning in. So we're just very grateful for the support. We're going to keep telling the stories and keep telling the truth. I mean, that's what drives us and what motivates us. And again, I think it's obviously trying to find a way for the world to exist together. We only have one world. Let's find a way that we can all work together and we can all win. It's always my message. And thank you guys for your time today.
Gentlemen, do you want me to put a bit of a closing video on? Maybe some scenery of Shanghai. You want that? Is that good with you guys?
Let's do it.
You can say goodbye to your audience. Okay, yeah. 3,750 people viewing this tonight. Thank you, everybody. I'm Alex from Reporterfy Media. That's Carl Zha with the host of Silk and Steel podcast. Thank you, Carl, for coming in and welcome to China. And I hope to see you. And Cyrus, great news. Thank you for doing the walk and talk with me there in Guangzhou. Look forward to watching that on your channel, the Cyrus Janssen channel. Always exciting to see the content out there. Okay, guys, it's been a while. Let's try to roll this clip, and I'll see you guys all in the comment box. Bye for now.